subscribe, and click the notification bell for never-ending horror. Pareidolia is the ability of the human brain to quickly find faces and figures similar to people. Have you ever looked up at the popcorn-like texture on your ceiling and saw a human face? Ever drive home at night and see human figures on the side of the road? It's definitely creepy, but pareidolia serves many vital purposes, one of which is protection. A human-like shape can mean imminent danger. Imagine the trip-like fear your mind experiences, though, when it sees a shape that is only vaguely human-like. Imagine encountering something in the woods that is both human and not human. Imagine being one of these unlucky people who have encountered real-life humanoids. If you want your story to be featured in a future episode of Darkness Prevails, share your story with us at darknessprevails.org. A pale-looking humanoid from CathEStar. Location: Mexico. I've been in a long-distance relationship with my girlfriend for a couple of years, and every summer and winter break, I'm able to travel to go see her. This encounter happened about 2 years ago at my girlfriend's house. I should mention that my girlfriend lives on the outskirts of her city in Mexico, where houses are around 200 to 300 yards apart and surrounded by dense woods. Usually, days and nights there go about peacefully, accompanied by the sounds of the woods and the occasional car passing by from others who lived close. I'd always considered her place to be perfect to spend time outdoors, until this occasion. Honestly, I don't think I've ever been this scared in my life. This sighting will be carved into my mind forever. On a chilly night of December, I was at my girlfriend's house. I had planned to spend the night with her since she would have been by herself that day. Her mom was out of town and she didn't want her to stay by herself either. We were having dinner in the kitchen at around 8 p.m. We chatted about activities we would do tomorrow, tasks her mom needed her to do, how much we missed each other, to list a few things. After about an hour of conversation and laughs, we decided to go into the living room and cuddle on the couch, watching TV. Then we both got up and put the dishes in the sink. She went into her bedroom and I went outside to the bathroom. The house layout consisted of a long corridor that connected pretty much every room in the house, and a back door at the end of the corridor, which led out to the patio. The patio was open, full of trees and plants, and the only thing separating the patio from the woods was a fence made up of stones and barbed wire that stood at around 1 meter tall. Halfway down the patio, there was the bathroom, being lit by a single and weak light bulb, so if anybody wanted to go, they had to walk outside, even if it had to be in the middle of the night. I reminded myself that I would never come out here at night because the drive would be so creepy. I remember when I opened the back door and stepped into the patio, a cold breeze stroked my face and sent shivers across my back. So I hurried to go back as quickly as possible because, to be honest, I was a little spooked going outside in the dark, knowing that the woods were pretty much just a few steps away. I finished doing my business, washed my hands, and started walking back, being careful not to trip on something because the light bulb was almost non-existent. I was about halfway when I heard a noise to my left. It was like someone stepping on a branch and it breaking underfoot. I stopped and quickly turned, trying to see what had made the noise. But I could only see a portion of the fence and nothing but darkness beyond that. However, I had this weird feeling that someone or something was watching me. Something on the other side of the fence. I stood in silence for around 30 seconds, listening to my surroundings, only to notice that the crickets had suddenly stopped. I got a bit freaked out as I knew for sure that they had been chirping when I first stepped out here. I was somewhat too scared to move, but I did anyway, almost running to get inside as soon as possible. When I returned, I went to my girlfriend, who was already in the living room, lying back down on the couch with the blanket on top. She quickly noticed that I looked a bit agitated and asked me what was wrong. "Your patio is, scary," I jokingly said, not wanting to tell her what I felt, because she hates anything that has to do with horror or scary stuff. I tried not to think about it, so I went around the couch and sat at the other end, putting my girlfriend's legs in my lap and asking what we were watching on the TV. I turned to my right, where there was a huge window on one side of the wall that gave me a perfect view of the patio. I hadn't noticed it before because it was next to a cabinet, which covered it from the perspective if you're going back into the living room. Now that I knew it was there, I kept turning to see outside, expecting to see something out there, still thinking how scary it looked. We were watching a boring documentary. The two of us weren't really talking as we watched, and I was beginning to get sleepy. But after about 20 minutes, I began to hear noises outside. Noises that seemed to be coming from the patio. I grabbed the remote to the TV and muted it to make sure I was hearing things right. And I was. There was a sound of twigs breaking and grass being stepped on. I quickly turned to my right to see outside the window, but I could only see plants and part of a trunk from a big tree nearby. The noise, although faint, stopped for a few seconds and resumed a few moments later, then stopped again. I stood frozen watching outside the window, almost as if waiting for a thing to appear. "Do you hear that?" I whispered to my girlfriend, but after I didn't get a reply, I turned around and stood up a little to see she had her eyes closed and she had fallen asleep. I was even more freaked out now, but I chose to believe it was probably a coyote or some other animal that lurks around in the woods at night. I kept watching the muted TV, waiting for the noise to start again, but after a while, I realized it had stopped. I turned around one more time to see outside the window, and I felt my heart sink into my stomach. The first thing I noticed when I looked outside was a faint image of a gray, pale, and tall humanoid figure. It was peeking from the side of the big tree trunk, and it was staring back at me. I was petrified, not wanting to even slightly move or breathe. I watched this thing as it watched me, even though I couldn't see its eyes because of the poor lighting. But I knew it was watching me. I knew it was aware of me. I somehow felt it. The creature was, like I said, extremely pale. I could see the contrast between its skin and the bark of the tree. The creature had very skinny shoulders and torso, as well as an elongated neck. It looked like it was around 6 or 7 feet tall. Unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, I could not distinguish in detail any facial features because of how dark it was, but I could perfectly picture in my head the shadowy areas around where the eyes would be for a person, and another one where the mouth would be. It was sort of grinning. At this point, I was trembling a little, and I wanted to let my girlfriend know what I was witnessing, but I didn't want to move a muscle or break eye contact with it. I felt like I needed to remain still or pretend that I wasn't paying attention to lose its attention. But no, the creature just kept staring, facing me, not moving an inch, like it was trying to play the same game as me. Then, to make things worse, the creature started to make these echoey clicking sounds, kind of like a frog but slower, and I noticed it began to turn its head to its left side, then turned back to look at me really fast. I didn't know what to think anymore. All I wanted was my girlfriend to wake up to prove to me that this thing was real. I began whispering her name in between my teeth and mouth, not even wanting to move my jaw. But she wouldn't wake up, and the thing kept doing the same, turning its head to the left and back to me really fast, all while clicking. Then I watched it crouch, kind of like when a big predator cat is hunting and lying low, preparing to attack. I remember whispering to myself, "What the heck?" I know, stupid. I didn't even think about the fact that if I woke my girlfriend up, she would start moving, and that thing would notice both of us for sure. But I was so scared that I kept trying. This went on for about 15 minutes before I realized I still had my girlfriend's foot in my hand below the blanket, as she had her legs on me still, and that it would not be able to see me moving under there. Only using my wrist, I slightly pulled her foot back and forth, whispering her name again and again. But she was in a deep sleep. She was out of it. Then I stood, because I was in shock when I saw the creature stand up again and started walking backwards, still looking at me, then disappeared into the darkness of the patio, still making the clicking sounds. I blinked a few times, realizing my eyes itched from staring at the creature too long. For some reason, I couldn't turn my head around. I just kept looking in the direction where the creature had disappeared, listening for any more noises and waiting for it to come back. After a few minutes passed, I took the chance to turn around. As if in slow motion, I turned my head to my girlfriend and started calling her name loud now, while pushing her leg and quickly scribbling my fingers on the sole of her foot to wake her up fast. Her foot jerked and she started turning. I stood up to her shoulders and patted her, whispering, "Hey, wake up." She opened her eyes and squinted at me, adjusting to the light of the TV and wondering why I woke her up. I kept telling her to remain still and silent when I heard the sound again. She looked at me, noticing the concern in my eyes, and asked, "What's wrong?" "Shh, be quiet," I followed, placing 2 fingers on her lips and looking into her eyes. I could tell she was getting freaked out, and I don't blame her. I would be too if someone woke me up, looking scared and telling me to be quiet. The clicking sound came again, but it was louder this time, as if the thing was on the other side of the window. This time, both of us heard the noise, and we were now looking at each other in silence, getting more and more frightened. "What is that?" my girlfriend asked, but I remained silent. Again, in slow motion, I started to turn my head to the window to check, and there it was. The thing was right outside the window, only a couple of feet away and staring right back at me. This time I had a clearer vision of how it looked, and I was wrong. I was petrified in fear when I noticed it didn't even have a mouth where a person's would have it. Instead, the mouth appeared to be where its neck was, which opened vertically, not horizontally. As its mouth opened, it vibrated with the clicking sounds, and hundreds of small razor-like teeth shined. It had oval-shaped eyes that were as dark as the night. I felt its gaze pierce through my soul. I started shaking and breathing heavily, not believing what I was seeing. My girlfriend raised up and peeked around my side to see what I was looking at, and I could feel her body tense up under me. She had seen it too. She tried to ask in a trembling voice what it was, but no answer came from me. Now we were both horrified, too horrified to even move a muscle. After the humanoid thing noticed my girlfriend move, it stepped forward and lowered its head almost as if scanning us. We jumped in fear after seeing the thing doing this, because we thought it would start coming towards us. My heart was beating so fast, I thought I would black out at any moment. Then the thing began to slowly walk to its right side, in the direction where the door to the corridor was, resuming its clicking sounds. If you've seen the movie Signs and remember the scene where that alien came out of the bushes outside the house, that would be an accurate representation of what I saw. We took a good look at every inch of that thing's body. It walked with its head turned towards us. After we lost sight of it through the window, we both sat up and looked at each other suddenly, and we heard something scratch the metal door that led to the corridor, as if the thing was feeling for it. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my girlfriend's wrist and jolted out of the living room, locking ourselves into the bedroom. We sat on the floor right next to the bedroom door, hiding in case that thing came inside the house. The scratching sounds continued, and my girlfriend began to cry, still asking what it was that I saw. I felt powerless, knowing I couldn't do anything to reassure her. I could only hold her and hope for the thing to give up and go away. The noise continued for about 3 minutes, when it suddenly stopped. Then we began hearing stepping noises all around the house, and we kept turning to whatever direction we heard the noise from, expecting something to happen. But eventually the noises stopped, and after an hour or so, we figured the creature must be gone. My girlfriend, still with tears in her eyes, told me she just wanted to get in bed. I agreed with her. My back was hurting from being in that crouch position for over an hour. We slowly crawled into bed, making the least noise possible, and covered ourselves with another blanket. "Don't worry, babe. Everything's gonna be okay tomorrow. Let's just get some sleep," I said to her, as I tightened my grip around her. She didn't reply, but after a while she was asleep again. As for me, I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. Instead, I kept my eyes opened and listened to every sound around us. The following day, we did not want to broach the subject, save for quickly agreeing that the thing we saw that night was not something of this world. My girlfriend said she felt its gaze piercing through her, almost like it had invisible feelers searching around. Nothing else was said. We were left sort of traumatized. I realized she was going to have to put up with that fear of going outside in the future, and I didn't want that thing anywhere near her again or her family. Days after the encounter, we both suffered from nightmares. She mentioned that sometimes she'd wake up in the middle of the night, screaming and trembling, and would not be able to stop until her mom went to check in on her. The fences that separated the patio and the woods had been redone since this. They now stand at 2 meters tall, blocking any access from the woods. They haven't had any other encounters again, but my girlfriend insists that the patio gives her chills at night. The Things on the Wall. From Sam. Location unknown. I barely remember when I was 4, but this is one of the few things that I can recollect clearly. I'm 14 now, and I don't know if what I saw was actually real, but I'm praying that it wasn't. I'm the youngest out of 4 kids, and my dad is a musician, my mother a teacher. This event scared me. I was sleeping with my parents for some reason. Probably yet another nightmare, as I had them frequently. But I couldn't fall asleep. I must have laid there for about 15 minutes, eyes shut tightly, but sleep never came. When I opened my eyes to shift positions to something more comfortable, I saw something crawling along the walls. It was actually multiple somethings. They appeared to be humanoid in shape. They were fairly small, about the size of toddlers, except these had sharp, chattering teeth and no hair whatsoever on their bodies. When they noticed that I saw them, they began crawling towards me, and I was so terrified that I couldn't make a sound. I wanted to scream or run away, or at least wake up my parents, but all I could do was tighten the grip on the blankets around me. I closed my eyes tight for as long as I could. I expected to feel claws or tiny teeth on me at any second. But as an entire hour passed by, I didn't feel anything, and my fear soon gave way to sleep. When I woke up, I told my parents about it, and they didn't believe me. I have no idea what I saw, if it was real or something birthed from my lack of sleep, I don't know. But it surely was terrifying. Creature in the Dark from Raine. Location unknown. Ever since moving out into the country, I became more and more like a night owl. One night, as I often liked doing, I was hanging outside in the backyard with my brother. We were playing a new game we had made up out of boredom, where one person laid in the hammock and the other pushed it to make it swing like it was going to tip. When I looked away from my brother for one moment, my eyes caught sight of something in the forest area just out of our yard. At first, I thought there's a person over there, but as I looked more closely, I noticed that it didn't look like a person much. But whatever it was definitely looking at us. When I rubbed my eyes and looked back, the thing was gone. But from what I'd seen, I'd gathered enough to know that this was something creepy. Its skin was pale, and there were horns growing from its head. The creature stood about 7 feet tall and looked as if it was a mix of a humanoid creature mixed with a sort of animal. When I asked my brother if he had seen it, he didn't believe me at first, and he thought that I was playing a prank on him to scare him. But he soon saw that I wasn't joking from my serious expression, and we both were getting scared. He got up and we looked through the yard slowly. After a few minutes, we didn't find a trace of what I'd seen. Suddenly, a shrieking sound rang out from somewhere in the forest, forcing us into a terrified run back inside the house. We locked the door and we stayed inside that night. I've heard that sound a couple of times since, but luckily, or unluckily, I haven't seen anything else. Metallic Humanoid from Tania. Location unknown. This story is from my mother. She was around 5 years old and lived in a 2-story house. She didn't sleep by herself. She slept with about 5 or 6 sisters of hers. Yeah, my grandma had 11 children. One day she was playing around in their room when the time to go to sleep came, and everyone was getting ready for bed. She crawled into bed and went to sleep. This was around 8 or 9 p.m. At about 2:30 or 3 a.m., she wakes up, and because her bed was near the window, she peeked out of it. At the time, there was construction going on next to her house. When she looked out from her bed to the outside, she saw this gold metallic figure, almost robotic looking, sitting on the edge of some drywall. When the thing saw that it was looking at her, it waved. She was so scared she covered her face with the blankets and tried to go to sleep, but she never did. Instead, she waited until sunrise, looked back out the window, and saw that the thing was gone. Now, 40 years later, she still remembers that event and still gets creeped out when thinking about it. Creepy Midnight Walk from Trinity Kelly. Location unknown. About a year ago, my twin sister and I decided to go on a walk. The thing about where we lived, it was technically in the middle of nowhere, and it was surrounded by forests upon forests. There are trails for people with 4-wheelers and ATVs and that kind of thing, which is what we usually took to walk on. Anyway, we were walking down a road, and the houses had no lights on, and as such we brought a flashlight. As we were walking, we ended up at an area that had no houses, and we were in the middle of the forest. We decided to follow a nearby path. My sister was up ahead of me, and we were almost in the woods when my sister suddenly just stopped. I saw her go really pale in the face, and she appeared to be sweating out of nowhere. Then she instantly turned and ran. It freaked me out, so I looked at her in confusion. Then I looked back where she had been, and I swear to God, I saw something that looked like a humanoid dog. Its arms were longer than my entire body and reached below what appeared to be its knees. It was towering, easily over 6 feet tall. As soon as I saw it, it turned its head to me, and it freaked me out so bad that I turned and bolted back the way we came, catching up to my sister in no time. The two of us were running for our lives. When I turned to see where the thing was, I swear to God I saw it running after us. We got past the road, and I was scared that it was still coming. We ran all the way back to our house, which was at least 2 miles away from the road we were on. When we got back home, we ran inside and locked the entire place down, then fell to the ground, breathing extremely hard. It was the scariest moment in our lives, and luckily, that was the end of the horror. We didn't see it again, and I hope we never do. The Thing That Followed Me Home, from PhysicsDontCare. Location: unknown. This happened to me a long time ago, and it still haunts me when I think about it. My family and I used to take hikes quite often, just strolling along, sometimes running, and sometimes we brought our bikes on the trail. However, our routine changed one time. We were walking on the same trails, except we were deeper in than we normally were. I had been going ahead further than the rest of my family. All of a sudden, I stopped right in my tracks when I saw something. Up ahead, there was this lengthy, pale humanoid at the end of the trail where I was moments from walking. I told my mom and she came running. Both my mother and brother told me that I was just seeing things. However, after we got back home, I went on my PS4 and tried to take my mind off of it with some games. But the entire time, I remember feeling watched. It was coming from a certain area too, the couch. We had bought a couch when I was much younger, and there was a little area there that was great for hiding, but it seemed to have this aura about it that made me want to cry and scream. I put my controller down and walked over. I peered into the little hiding area. It was dark, and I could feel something cold on my leg all of a sudden. I looked down at it. I didn't see anything, but I swear it felt like something was grabbing onto me. When I looked back toward the couch area, I saw a face. I screamed and jumped back. It was the same face on that thing that I saw from the trail. I didn't know what to do except stare at it, and it stared right back. Eventually, it just faded away into the darkness. I was so frightened by this that I slept in my mom's room, but the next night would be even worse. Being so creeped out, I still had this thing in the back of my mind, but I decided that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. When I went into my room to grab my phone at one point, we were about to watch a movie, but normally I just called my friends rather than watch the movie. I'd sit in my room and chat. Anyway, I grabbed my phone and called one of my friends. Immediately he picked up, and he sounded scared. He was freaking out, telling me that it knew that I would call him. I asked him what he was talking about. He told me that he had a dream just the night before, and when he described what he saw, I felt chills go down my body. He said that a small, thin, and pale humanoid figure told him that I would call him that very moment. He didn't think much of it, until it actually happened at the exact time of day that the dream said it would be. We were both terrified at this point. He broke out into tears and kept repeating, "I'm sorry," and then he hung up. I pulled my phone away, looking at the blinking number as the call had been ended, and then I locked the screen. When I saw it, I screamed. On the black screen, I saw something behind me. That pale, familiar face, just over my shoulder. I jumped up and turned around, but there was nothing there, even though I know I saw the thing. My brother, upon hearing my scream, barged into my room wanting to know what was going on. I just looked at him, and I shook my head. I haven't seen that creature since, and I'm planning on doing everything I can to avoid it entirely. The Thing in the Woods, from TeraLovesYouTube. Location, Mancos, Colorado. One day in July, me, my boyfriend, and 2 other friends decided to go to this nature park in town. We were going to play hide and seek. Now, this park isn't too big, but it does have plenty of hiding places. I was the first to seek, so I counted to 40, then began searching for the others. I went off of one of many little trails and heard the sounds of leaves crunching coming from the left of me. I turned my head to the left, expecting to find one of my friends sneaking around. Instead, I saw what looked to be a person crouching behind a tree. It's one of them, I thought. I called out their names one by one, but none of them got an answer. I looked around the surrounding area to see if I could see anyone else, but no one else was around. It was just me and whoever was crouching behind this tree. I turned back to where the thing was, but now it was gone. So I went out to look around the other trails. I eventually found my boyfriend, and we went around looking together for the other 2. We went down to a more muddy area, and I was looking around when David, my boyfriend, nudged my shoulder and told me to look to our left. I did as he said, and to our horror, there, standing about 20 yards away from us, stood a humanoid-looking creature that was nearly as tall as the trees. Its arms were stretched down to its knees, and its skin was a charred gray with red patches all over it, and its knees were bent backwards. It wasn't facing us, so we ran out and heard it scream, which scared the crap out of us. So we ran and eventually ran into the other 2. We told them what had just happened, but they didn't believe us until all of us heard the scream once more. We booked it to the clearing of the park and sat there contemplating what we had just heard. We described the being to our friends, and they just looked at each other and said that they had seen something just like that, except it was crouching behind a tree, and that's why we had found them together like that. They were scared. The other 2 went home, and David and I went to my house for a while. None of us have seen anything like it since, but the image of that creature still haunts me, and I hope I never see anything like it again. Weird Creature Sighting, from CrazyWithoutCause. Location, Australia. Let's get to the point. I'm an Australian who has spent most of his life surrounded by the bush. This makes me accustomed to all of the weird noises that may come when night falls. This particular incident occurred one night at about 2:30 a.m. I was watching YouTube with my cat, who was asleep. All of a sudden, this loud shriek erupts, like what you would expect from a howler monkey, but with a more human undertone to it. My cat's head immediately perked up, and he looked out the window. His back arched up, and he started hissing and acting all aggressive. I have decorative rocks outside my window, so when anything walks in, you can hear the rocks moving. I did hear the rocks moving around, like there was a person walking through them. Cautiously, I got out of bed and made a crack in my blinds to see who was outside. My veins ran cold. It was about 6 or 7 feet tall and wasn't wearing any clothes. It was completely hairless, and its eyes were locked onto mine. I hadn't made a sound, yet it was looking right at me. Its body turned to face me as well, so I was staring directly at the entirety of the thing. We stood still for what felt like hours, just keeping each other in our sights. I glanced down at the creature's hands for a split second, and I saw that it had a cat clasped in its grip, red dripping from the body. I locked eyes again with it, and I noticed that the creature had a mouth. I don't know why, but that freaked me out the most. It started to turn away to walk down the road. I rushed to put my jeans and a shirt on, and I reached into the cupboard to pull out a torch and a blade that I always have hidden in my room. I slammed the back door open and ran down the road after it. I could see the thing just casually strolling into the bush behind my house. It took me about a minute to sum up the courage to enter in after it. I walked into the bush with a torch and a blade in hand. Then I heard a scuttling behind me. I freaked out and turned, my torch illuminating what appeared to be a possum. I told it to bugger off, then I shooed it away. But it stared at me blankly, which only creeped me out more. I turned around and walked another 500 meters or so, and that's when I found the cat's body, all messed up. That made me rethink coming out here at all. As I turned around to leave, I suddenly heard that same shriek from before. I ran as fast as I could, dropping my torch in the progress. I finally made it to my back door. I opened it and ran straight into my room, and my cat was staring at me. I patted it and tried to relax in bed. Later on, I woke up in the morning at around 10, and I strolled out to the kitchen. While I was making my morning coffee, I looked out the window. My jaw dropped. All along the side of the outside wall was a deep gash. I called up my father and he came over to have a look. He said it looked like when someone drags a screw against someone's car, but this looked way too deep to be a screw mark. I thanked him for freaking me out even more. We covered the gash in plaster and went on with our day. I've done some research on what it possibly could be. I kept coming back to the rake, but that's just supposed to be a creepypasta. I personally think that it was a humanoid creature of some kind, but specifically, I have no idea. Thanks for hearing out my story. I led something home, and it got my cat. From KeirasaurusRex. Location unknown. I'm a 14-year-old girl, 5'1" and 100 pounds soaking wet, so I'm not the most intimidating person in the world. This happened about a month ago as of writing this. I like to skateboard at night. It's become a bit of a ritual to go down my street right before I get ready for bed. My street is about a mile long and is surrounded by woods on both sides, so basically in the middle of nowhere. One night I was about halfway down my road when I started to feel weird. You know that stereotypical feeling of being watched? Yeah, it was that. Being creeped out, I decided to end my ride early, peering anxiously into the woods expecting to see something creepy there. I decided to look behind me, and that's when I saw it. A large humanoid figure standing at the end of my sight line. It was tall and much too dark. Its long arms reached past where a human's knees would be. I have no idea what it was because it or he was most definitely not human. It was only vaguely shaped like one. I hauled tail out of there and down a hill at lightning speed, but every time I looked back, I could still see it. It was following me. When I got home, I ran inside and up to my room. I shut off all the lights and hid in the corner. As wimpy as that sounds, I know most of you would do it too. I was home alone and no sane police officer would believe me, so I had no choice but to wait it out. Eventually, I fell asleep. Everything was normal for about a week. But one day after that, our family cat went missing. 3 days later, we found him strung up to a pine tree. Something had gotten him and left him there. I remember when I saw that, I threw up and I cried, and I knew what had done this. Ever since then, I've been hearing the occasional scratching sound outside my window every night, and I never feel alone. My night terrors are getting worse, and all I can think about is that if I'm not careful, I'll be the next one hung up from a tree. The Lightning Figure. From FerrumBruti. Location: Wythe County, Virginia. I was 13 years old, and I took a ride with my grandmother down to the cove off the backside of Wythe County outside of Scrooge's, where the Walmart and theater are at now. We were riding in her blue Ford Taurus to pick up my great aunt Alice from her place. It was cold, it was the evening, and it was raining as well. The lightning was illuminating the clouds overhead. I was never frightened by weather or thunder and lightning. It's a common thing you find in southwest Virginia. We had pulled into the family farmland after pulling off the back road. The path to the farm was dirt and gravel and muddy as well. It sat back on the hollow of 2 peaks behind it. As we pulled up, my grandmother turned off the car and waited with me inside for Aunt Alice to come out. I was bored, and like any curious teenager, I looked out the back passenger window. I was just trying to pass the time and let my mind wander. I had just been getting over my other grandmother's passing, so I felt a good way to get over that was to spend time with my only remaining grandmother. As I was looking across the road, I noticed the thunder and lightning become both more illuminating and intense as well. My grandmother leaned close to comfort me. "Don't worry, Tim. She should be out soon, and we'll be on our way then." For a brief moment, I felt comforted, but as I looked closer to the hilltop across the road, I noticed something strange. What appeared at first as a midnight blue soon changed to a slight royal navy blue color. I panicked and screamed for my grandma. Quickly, she snapped to attention and looked out the window. She looked and saw nothing to worry about and reassured me. She said she was right there and nothing bad was going to happen. I took this to heart. Soon enough, Aunt Alice showed up with an umbrella and cane. She was hunched over in her fragile state. She walked her way out with that fiery spirit of hers, and she climbed into the car. Aunt Alice greeted me and patted me on the head. The two decided we would wait in the car for the rain to pass, if possible, before departing to go to her home back in town. 20 minutes had passed since my aunt got in the car, and again my mind began to wander. I was now just looking up at the hilltop nearby. Once again, the sky lit up like it did that last time, freaking me out, and my grandmother said it was nothing to worry about once more. But suddenly, after my grandma looked out of her window, she shouted, "Alice, look!" All of us turned toward the ridgetop. At first, I thought it was lightning, but it was in a ball sort of shape. It had a greenish-blue haze about it, but once the haze faded around it, it began to swell and pulse until at that point, the outline took a shape. I began to choke with fright, not sure what I was looking at, but at the same time, I was in awe. All my great aunt and my grandmother could do was pause and glance at each other, then look back up to the ridge. The figure walked in a pace almost tense, anxious, yet determined. It startled me. Lightning is energy. It doesn't take form like a person, and it doesn't have intelligence. I saw my Aunt Alice grab her Bible and the two prayed, and I joined them. From that point, the figure vanished. My aunt and grandma both decided with this tense moment gone, it was time we left. As she started the car and pulled out, we went down the hill and toward the gate. I quickly got out to open it, then close it after the car pulled through. Then I rushed back in and hopped inside. We would drive further down the old road, talking about what we saw. Little did we know that it wasn't over. My Aunt Alice alerted us again. With a gasp, she said, "There it is." At the top of the ridge where it paralleled with the back road, it seemed to be rushing side by side with my grandma's car. It was that figure with no face, no expression, just an outline of energy. It kept pace with us. My grandmother basically floored it, and the engine roared to life. Normally sweet and well-mannered, my grandma was now done with this. The car picked up speed, and we screeched to a halt, seeing a tree fall over in front of us. The figure was behind us on the ridge now, but it was catching up fast. I saw my grandmother grab tightly on the wheel and close her eyes before screaming, "Just leave us alone!" After that, there was nothing. The thunder, the rain, the tree in front of us in the road, and us in the blue Ford Taurus, everything went calm again, and the figure was gone. A driver happened along the scene and helped us move the tree. Afterwards, we got back in and went home. That night, I don't think any of us were getting any rest. My parents would later make it back after spending some time at my mom's high school reunion. My grandmother and aunt would explain the story to them, but they were too tired to care. It had been a long night, I guess. I haven't been back up that cove in a long time, not even after both my grandma and my great aunt passed away. Yet at the same time, I make sure when going down a back road, I know what the weather's going to be, and I'm always mindful of my surroundings. Some things in life are meant to be left alone and not pursued. This was one of those things. Nothing is more insidious than humanoid creatures. You see, insidious is a word that means tempting yet harmful. When you're lost or in need of help, surely a feeling of relief would flood you if you saw a humanoid figure up ahead. But that figure is just a little too tall, a little too thin, with a mouth not in the right spot, and that's when the fear fills you. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. You can always send in your story to possibly be read on the show at darknessprevails.org/submit. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/darknessprevails or get some of our merchandise at teespring.com/stores/darknessprevails. Or if you're on YouTube, simply click that shop button below. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video about 5 creepy camping stories. Mo says, "Relax y'all, it's just me. I just camp differently. I don't think it's about how you camp. I think it's about how you look. Because if that's what you look like and you show up in my campsite, I'll crap enough bricks to build a freaking house right there." Cam says, "That's why we don't go camping in Jamaica. Big up, Darkness. And now you just sealed my fate because I have to camp in Jamaica." Me says, "Today's my birthday. Thanks for the present, Darkness." Well, happy birthday, and I'm glad I got you a cool video for your special day, because I totally did that on purpose. Anyway, I hope you made it a good one. Gabriela Garcia says, "Do you have Instagram, Darkness?" I do, don't really use it anymore. I'm really just on Twitter these days. At Dark Prevails, by the way. And Julian Garcia says, "You seem like a chill dude. Do you have any stories of your own?" I do. You can find it in my backlog on my YouTube channel, or just look up on YouTube, Darkness Prevails' very own. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode, everyone. But don't you worry, more scary stories are on the way soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are some amazing patrons that continue to donate. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy.